Well, welcome to day 15 of the Bonhoeffer study. Glad you're with us again today. I know it's been a long haul. We appreciate those of you who are sticking with us through the devotionals. We hope you find them helpful. Today, Bonhoeffer discusses the Beatitude. Blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for they will inherit the kingdom of heaven. It raises up a couple of questions, a couple of interesting questions, I think. The very first one is, what is intended here by the words of Jesus when he says, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness? What does he mean by righteous? In this particular case, it's less about the imputed righteousness that God gives us than it is actually about the right things that we should be doing, the fairness and justice in the world. Righteousness in the Bible as a whole typically means, in its most base form, fairness and rightness, doing things that are just and fair. And so Jesus says, blessed are those who are persecuted because they do things that are fair and just. Fairness and justice were values in the Roman Empire as well. And so even in the first century when Jesus said these words, the Roman Empire itself celebrated itself for its justice and fairness. And a specific poem was written just entirely to talk about the righteousness of Tiberius and Augustus, two emperors of the Roman Empire. And so they were no strangers to thinking about righteousness or justice or fairness. And I think it's celebrated in our culture today as well, this idea of fairness and justice. You can think about it in terms of housing and voting rights and equality and lots of different issues. Our culture considers itself to be a fair and just and righteous society and culture, as did the Roman Empire. Which leads to a second question. If that's the case, why then would anybody be persecuted for fairness and justice, for righteousness? What would be the reason for persecution? I think the reason is that cultures celebrate fairness and justice and righteousness, but they don't actually always execute it, do they? We say we're fair and just and right, but we don't actually always do it. This is certainly true in the Roman Empire. Even as this poem was written about Tiberius and Augustus and extolled the virtues of their righteousness, there were a group of launderers in Pompeii. You'll know Pompeii as the city that was buried in ash when Mount Vesuvius erupted. And so we have lots of things we can go back and look at. And one of the things that these laundry workers did is they etched into the plaster of their little laundry room, their laundry business, words that said, basically mocked the poem that extolled the virtues of Tiberius and Augustus. And the idea was this: you guys say that we here in the Roman Empire have justice and righteousness, but in effect they say we're not experiencing that. Well, how true is that for our culture today as well? We often extol the virtues of fairness and justice and righteousness, and yet we don't have it. I think many people have noticed we have two Americas, the left America and the right America, or the red America and the blue America. But I think there's a deeper divide, a class divide, between the haves and the have-nots. And in J.A. Dande's wonderful book Dignity, he goes out and he crawls the backwaters of middle America, sits at McDonald's, talks with addicts and with prostitutes, and he finds the people who feel left out of the American culture and the American system. People that have wanted to get ahead but couldn't for one reason or another, sometimes admittedly by their own choices, but other times not by their own choices. In fact, I think we find, if we look carefully, that we believe in fairness and justice and righteousness, particularly when it involves our own children, but we are less inclined to think about other people's children. And so we wind up with persecution when we as Christians begin to think about fairness and justice and righteousness as the Bible talks about it. That is, not just as some great big grand idea for the culture, but the idea that we have to be fair and just and righteous with the people around us. In other words, to be righteous in the biblical sense is really to change our outlook, to move our outlook from the idea of fairness and rightness for me, to think about fairness and rightness for other people around me. That is to move from a me-centered approach to the world and a me-centered approach to success and a me-centered approach to what is fair and right, and turn that and look at other people and think what is fair and right for other people, and to give up our own rights. And in fact, Bonhoeffer says exactly this at one point in his book on discipleship. He says, we who are Christians, we renounce property, happiness, rights, righteousness, that is our own, honor, and violence, that is, we would not get violent to have our rights taken care of. Think about those words for a little bit. All those things that we renounce, property and happiness, those are rights that we give up. Righteousness and honor. This is a deep change, I think, to how our culture views righteousness and fairness. Bonhoeffer is calling us to something quite a bit deeper than just buying into the American dream and the American culture. He's calling us to a changed outlook, an outlook that looks away from our own needs and our own desires and our own rights, and thinks about others around us and offers to them from the things that God himself has given us. It's an amazing thought, and I hope you'll consider it as we think about this. Think about the things that you need to be giving up. Think about the things that you consider rights. Think about whether or not they really are rights.